The Great Hall of the Galactic Concord Council was not made for noise, it was made for silence. For thousands of years, the marble white chamber on the world of Tharoon had been the place where ancient species made careful decisions about the fate of the stars. Words were chosen with care here, voices were kept low. Even the lights were soft, glowing from the high ceiling like captured moons. But today, the silence felt heavy. It pressed down on every creature seated in the curved rows of the hall. 17,000 member worlds were watching this broadcast. Every screen on every planet of the Concord was turned to this single room. Everyone knew something big was coming, something that would change everything. At the center of the hall stood Archon Veselian of the Kelth Dominion. He was a tall being made of living crystal, with 6 long limbs, and a body that caught the light and threw it back in soft colors. His species had led the Concord Council for 3,000 years. He had given many speeches in this hall, but today, his crystal form glowed with a strange, deep color. Those who knew the Kelth well could tell he was nervous. He raised 2 of his 6 limbs and began to speak. His voice was calm, but every word was sharp. "Members of the Concord," he said, "after many years of patience, after many warnings that were not heard, the Council has reached a decision. The Terran Unified Compact has refused to follow our guidance. They have spread too fast. They have built too many ships. They have shared their dangerous technology with worlds that were not ready. They have ignored our laws again and again." He paused. The hall was so quiet that the soft hum of the air system seemed loud. "Today," he said, "the Galactic Concord Council declares war on humanity." Gasps went up across the hall. Some creatures clicked their claws in shock. Others bowed their heads. A few looked angry. No one looked happy. War had not come to the Concord in many, many years. The older races had almost forgotten what it was. But the real reason for this war was not the one Veselian spoke aloud. Everyone in that hall knew the truth. Humans were growing too fast. They were too clever, too strong, too different. The ancient species of the Concord had expected humans to be like every other young race that joined them, weak, thankful, easy to control. Instead, humans had started building their own path, and the Council could not allow that. Far away from Tharoon, on Earth's moon, a different group of people were watching the same broadcast. The room was called the Armstrong Observation Chamber. It sat deep inside the great lunar base that humans had built as their main government post for dealing with the Concord. Dozens of officials filled the room, admirals in dark blue uniforms, diplomats in formal suits, science officers, members of Earth's parliament. All of them sat in shocked silence as Veselian's voice came through the speakers. When the word war came, the room seemed to freeze. A diplomat near the front dropped her tablet. An old admiral closed his eyes and whispered something under his breath that might have been a prayer. A young officer turned pale and looked like he might be sick. One woman began to cry quietly, her hands over her mouth. War. The word hung in the air like smoke. They all knew what it meant. The Concord had more ships than humans could count, more worlds, more soldiers, more of everything. Humanity had maybe 200 colonies. The Concord had 17,000. It was not a fair fight. It was not even close. "They've done it," one admiral whispered. "They've really done it." "We need to call an emergency session of Parliament," said another. "We need to ask for peace. Offer them something. Anything." "There is no anything," said a third voice bitterly. "They want everything." Near the back of the room, standing beside a tall window that showed the curved edge of the moon and the blue marble of Earth beyond, one woman watched the broadcast without moving. Her name was Commodore Ileana Voss. She was 43 years old. Her dark hair was pulled back tight. A thin white scar cut across her left cheekbone, a gift from the Belt Uprising many years ago. Her uniform was plain, no medals, no extra decorations, even though she had earned more than most people in that room. She was known in the Terran Navy as a quiet woman who spoke little and listened much. The soldiers who served under her loved her. The politicians who worked above her did not always understand her. She was famous for one thing. She saw things others did not see. Her aide, a young officer named Lieutenant Park, stood beside her. His hands were shaking. He was only 24. He had never known a war. No human alive had ever fought one against the Concord. Park turned to his commander, his voice cracking. Commodore, they've declared war. They've actually declared war on us. Ilyana did not answer right away. She watched the broadcast for a few more seconds. Then she let out a long, slow breath. It was not the breath of a frightened person. It was the breath of someone who had been holding something inside for a very long time and could finally let it go. A small smile appeared on her face. Finally, she said. Park blinked. He was sure he had heard wrong. Ma'am? He asked. Ilyana did not look at him. She kept her eyes on the screen, where Archon Veselian was still speaking about duty and order and the safety of the galaxy. I said finally, Lieutenant. Park's mouth opened and closed. He looked around to see if anyone else had heard. A few of the nearby officers had. They were staring at Ilyana now with confused faces. One of them, an older admiral named Kovac, was frowning deeply. Commodore Voss, Admiral Kovac said, his voice low and hard. This is not the time for jokes. Ilyana turned to him at last. Her eyes were calm. Her smile was gone, but something in her face had changed. It was as if a mask she had worn for many years had finally slipped. I am not joking, sir, she said. I have never been more serious in my life. She looked around the room, at all the frightened, angry, sad faces. These were good people, smart people, but they did not understand yet. They thought this was the end. Ilyana knew better. Gentlemen, she said quietly, ladies, I think it is time I showed you something. Something my team and I have been building for a very, very long time. She turned and walked toward the door. The room watched her go in stunned silence. Come with me, she said over her shoulder. All of you. We have a lot to talk about. The ride from the moon to Earth took less than an hour. The shuttle was quiet during the trip. No one spoke much. Commodore Ilyana Voss sat near the front with her eyes closed. But she was not sleeping. Lieutenant Park watched her from across the aisle. He had served under her for 2 years, and he had never seen her like this. Calm. Yes, she was always calm. But this was different. This was the calm of a person who had been waiting for something their whole life, and now that thing had arrived. They landed at a military airfield in the American state of Colorado, near an old mountain called Cheyenne. From there, a convoy of black vehicles took the group deep into the mountain itself, through tunnels most of the officials had never seen before. Down and down they went, past security gates, past guards with weapons, past doors that needed 3 different kinds of keys to open. Admiral Kovac leaned over to Ilyana as they walked. Voss, he said in a low voice, I have been in the Terran Navy for 38 years. I did not know this place existed. Very few people do, sir, Ilyana said. How deep are we? 9 levels below the old command bunker, sir. About 2 kilometers down. Kovac looked at her sharply. 2 kilometers? What is down here? Ilyana did not answer. She just kept walking. The final door opened with a soft hiss, and the group stepped into a huge round room. The walls were covered with screens. At the center of the room was a large circular table, and above the table floated a 3-dimensional map of the galaxy, glowing in soft blues and whites. It showed every star system humanity knew about, but the map had markings on it that none of the officials recognized. Little red dots, lines connecting systems, symbols they had never seen before. Please sit, Ilyana said. The officials took seats around the table. Some of them were still in shock from the council's announcement. Others were angry. Angry at the conquered. Angry at being kept in the dark. Angry at Ilyana for knowing things they did not know. Ilyana stood at the head of the table. She took a deep breath. 60 years ago, she began. When humanity first made contact with the Concord Council, something happened that was never told to the public. Something that was hidden, even from most of the Terran government. She pressed a button, and the map zoomed in on a small system near Earth. When the first Concord diplomats came to us, they seemed friendly. They offered trade. They offered protection. They called us a developmental species that needed their guidance. But they also did something else. They took samples of our DNA without asking. They scanned our cities without permission. They placed hidden devices in our systems. Our first generation of leaders discovered all of this very quickly. We were being studied, not welcomed. Studied. The officials looked at each other in surprise. They planned to control us from the start, Ilyana continued. Not as partners, as pets, as a species to be shaped and bent and kept small. A small group of our leaders understood this. They called themselves the Deep Program. They began to prepare, not for peace, for the day the Council would try to tighten its grip. She pressed another button. The map changed. Now it showed dozens of red dots scattered across the galaxy, in places that were officially empty space. 47 hidden shipyards, Ilyana said, built in rogue star systems, around dead stars, behind asteroid fields. Places the Concorde never looks because they think there is nothing there. For 60 years, we have been building ships. Ships the Council does not know about. Ships they cannot see. Admiral Kovacs stood up slowly, his face pale. How many ships, Commodore? Ilyana met his eyes. 11,000, sir. And counting. The room went completely silent. 11,000 warships. The official Terran Navy had less than 2,000. The numbers did not seem possible. That is not all, Ilyana said. She pressed the button again. Now images of strange weapons appeared on the screens. The Concorde uses plasma weapons and graviton beams, she said. Very fancy, very advanced. But we learned something. Their ships are built to defend against energy weapons, not against simple physics. So we built kinetic weapons. Railguns that fire metal rods so fast they hit like small asteroids. The rods do not glow. They do not give off heat signatures. Concorde sensors have trouble seeing them until it is too late. She pressed again. More images. Soldiers in strange suits. Gene-adapted Marines. Humans who can fight in atmospheres and pressures the Concorde thinks will kill anyone. We can fight on worlds they cannot even land on. Another press. Lines of code and glowing symbols. Artificial intelligence. The Concorde banned it across all their worlds. They said it was too dangerous. The truth is, they were afraid of it. They knew a species with good AI would not need the Council. So, we kept ours. We improved it. Our AI systems are now 60 years ahead of anything the Concorde has. The officials were staring at her with open mouths now. Some looked afraid. Some looked excited. Some looked both at once. Why? A senator asked, his voice shaking. Why build all this in secret? Why not tell the people? Ilyana's face was hard. Because if we had told the people, the Council would have learned. Their spies are everywhere. Their listening devices are on every world. The only way to keep a secret from the Concorde is to keep it from almost everyone. Even from most of our own leaders. I am sorry, Senator. That is the truth. She turned and looked at the great map. We knew this day would come. Every empire the Concorde has ever faced has ended the same way. First they help you, then they guide you, then they protect you from your own decisions. Then, one day, you wake up, and you are not really free anymore. Your children speak their language. Your worlds follow their laws. Your dreams are small because their rules keep them small. We have seen this pattern in our own history, among our own empires. We knew it when we saw it again in the stars. She turned back to the room. The Concorde thinks they have declared war on a young colony, on a small, weak species that will beg for peace within months. But they have not. She paused. Her eyes were bright and hard. They have declared war on a species that learned war before it learned fire. Admiral Kovacs sat down slowly. He put his hands on the table. For a long moment, he did not speak. Then he looked up at Ilyana. Commodore Voss, he said quietly. What do you need? Ilyana smiled for the second time that day. I need you to trust me, sir, she said. And I need you to be ready, because the Concorde's first fleet is coming to our system. And when they arrive, we are going to give them an answer. They will never forget. The Kelth battle fleet arrived in the Sol system 3 weeks after the declaration of war. The fleet was called the Serenity of Order, and it was considered one of the finest fleets in the Concorde. 200 warships, 40,000 crew members of various species, led by Grand Admiral Thessarion, a Kelth officer who had served in the fleet for 500 years. Thessarion was not expecting a real fight. The Council doctrine for dealing with young species was always the same. You arrived with overwhelming force. You destroyed a few military targets to show your power. You avoided killing civilians, so the young species would see you as merciful. Then you waited. Usually within a few weeks, the young species would send diplomats begging for peace. They would sign treaties that limited their freedom. They would accept guidance, and the war would end. This had worked 14 times in Concord history. Thessarion expected the 15th time to be no different. His fleet came out of warp at the edge of the Sol system, near the cold ring of ice and rock that humans called the Kuiper Belt. The ships spread out in a wide formation, their beautiful crystal hulls catching the distant sunlight. Sensors reached out, searching for Terran defenses. The sensors found very little. Grand Admiral, one of his officers reported, "We detect only a small Terran force near Neptune, about 40 ships, all older designs. It appears they were not ready for us." Thessarion felt satisfied. This would be easy. "Advance toward the inner system," he ordered. "We will crush their defense fleet, then take up position near their homeworld and wait for their surrender." The serenity of order began to move inward. Ships arranged in perfect formation. The Kuiper Belt slowly drifted past them, a vast region of rocks and ice and frozen comets, stretching for billions of kilometers in every direction. What Thessarion did not know was that the Terran Navy had been preparing the Kuiper Belt for 60 years. The small defense force near Neptune was bait. Behind every large asteroid, inside every ice rock bigger than a small moon, humanity had hidden something. Sensors, missile platforms, small ships with their engines cold, their signals silent. Entire warships hiding behind natural objects, waiting. And deep in the outer system, above a frozen moon called Triton, the Terran flagship Tus Ozymandias watched the Concord fleet approach. On the bridge of the Ozymandias, Admiral Marcus Kovacs stood before a large screen that showed the approaching enemy. 3 weeks ago, he had been a man who thought humanity was about to die. Now he commanded the largest hidden fleet in human history. Behind him stood Commodore Ileana Voss, watching the same screen with her arms folded. "They are moving into position," Kovacs said quietly. "They do not see us." "They cannot see us, sir," Ileana replied. "Our ships are in cold mode. Their sensors are looking for engine heat and energy signals. We are giving off neither. How close do we let them get?" Ileana's eyes were fixed on the map. "Until they cannot escape, sir." Minutes passed. The Concord fleet continued inward, confident and relaxed, like a lion walking into tall grass without knowing the grass was full of hunters. They passed the first line of hidden human ships, then the second, then the third. When the Concord fleet was deep inside the trap, Ileana nodded to the admiral. "Now, sir." Kovac turned to his communications officer. "All ships, open fire." What happened next would be taught in Terran military schools for 1,000 years. 400 human warships woke up at once. Engines flared. Weapons came online. But they did not fire energy weapons. They fired something the Concord was not ready for. Railguns. Thousands of them. Each one a long metal tube. Each one firing a simple rod of tungsten metal, as long as a tall man, weighing hundreds of kilograms. Each rod was thrown forward so fast that it moved at a large fraction of the speed of light. The Concord ships had shields. Good shields. The shields were designed to stop plasma bolts and energy beams. They were not designed to stop lumps of metal moving that fast. The first wave of rods hit the Kelth fleet like the hammers of angry gods. A Concord battleship exploded into a cloud of glittering crystal dust. Then another. Then another. The rods did not glow. They did not give warnings. They just struck. And where they struck, ships died. On the Concord flagship, Grand Admiral Thessarion stared in horror at the screens as his fleet began to come apart around him. "What are they using?" he demanded. "Scan the weapons," Grand Admiral, his sensor officer reported, panic rising in his voice. "The weapons give off no energy signals. They are solid objects. They are moving at relativistic speeds. Our shields are not designed to—" Another rod struck. The bridge shook violently. Somewhere in the ship, an entire deck exploded. "Return fire," Thessarion shouted. "Target their ships." But the Concord gunners had a problem. Every time they locked onto a human ship, the ship would vanish. Not destroy itself, just disappear from sensors. The humans were using the sun itself, hiding their ships in the shadows of the Kuiper Belt objects, jumping their positions with short warp hops, then firing again from new angles. And there were other problems. Drone swarms, thousands of small human machines, poured out of hidden bays and attacked Concorde ships in ways the Kelth tactical computers could not predict. The drones did not follow orders in real time. They had been given their missions days ago, and they could not be jammed because they were not listening. They just hunted. Concorde AI systems, meanwhile, were failing. A Terran cyber attack, prepared decades in advance, had slipped into the Concorde network the moment their ships entered the system. Computers went dark. Weapons locked up. Shield generators flickered. The Concorde had never faced serious AI warfare because the Concorde had banned AI development. Thessarian watched his great fleet die around him. He had 500 years of military experience, and none of it had prepared him for this. The humans were not fighting a proper battle. They were not honorable. They were not showing themselves. They were simply destroying him from the shadows, with weapons his species had abandoned as primitive long ago. In 2 hours, the serenity of order was gone. 200 ships, 40,000 crew, shattered into dust and silence. Aboard the Ozymandias, the bridge was quiet. There was no cheering, no celebration. Human soldiers simply watched their screens as the last Concorde ship died. Admiral Kovac turned to Ilyana. "Casualties?" he asked. "2 injured, sir. A training accident on the Perseus, unrelated to the battle." Kovac closed his eyes for a long moment. Then he opened them. "Send the recording to Tharoon," he said. "Send it to every world in the Concorde. Let them see what happened here. Let them know what we are." Ilyana nodded. She pressed a button. The message went out to 17,000 worlds. And across the Concorde, every species that had been silent for 10,000 years began, slowly, to listen. The news of the Kuiper Belt battle hit the Concorde like a cold wave. For the first time in living memory, a council fleet had been wiped out. Not damaged, not defeated in a close fight. Erased. The message that Admiral Kovac had sent across the stars showed every moment of it. And across 17,000 worlds, ordinary creatures watched in silence as the proud Kelth fleet burned. On the world of Tharoon, Archon Viselion called an emergency council meeting. His crystal body glowed with colors his species rarely showed in public. Shame, fear, anger. He stood before the council and demanded total war. "These humans," he said, his voice shaking, "have broken every rule of civilized warfare. They hide. They strike from shadows. They use weapons we thought were beneath any thinking species. They use machine minds we have outlawed for 10,000 years. They are not a species. They are a disease. And if we do not stop them now, they will spread to every world in the galaxy." The council agreed. 3 great powers committed their full strength to the war. The Kelth Dominion, the Morvani hegemony, a species of massive warriors from a high-gravity world, and the liquid consensus of Ore, a thinking ocean species whose ships sailed the stars in crystal bubbles of living water. Together, they gathered 40,000 warships. Entire species turned their factories to war. Billions of soldiers were called to service. The message to humanity was simple. You have won one battle, but you cannot win a war against the whole galaxy. But humanity had already thought about this. On Earth, Commodore Ilyana Voss was promoted to the new rank of War Marshal. She was given command of all Terran military operations. She did not want the promotion. She told the Parliament that she was a soldier, not a leader. But they gave it to her anyway. Because they needed someone who understood what was coming. They needed the woman who had said finally when war was declared. Ilyana moved her command to a hidden base in the Oort cloud, far beyond the outer planets. From there, she began to coordinate a war effort that shocked even her own allies. She did not fight the Concorde on their terms. She knew humanity could not win a proper pitched battle against 40,000 ships. So, she did not try. Instead, she sent human ships to attack Concorde supply lines. Small, fast ships that jumped in, destroyed food and fuel convoys, and jumped out. Whole Concorde fleets had to stop and wait for supplies that never came. She sent human cyber teams to attack Concorde computer networks. Viruses crawled through Concorde systems, turning their own weapons against them. An entire Morvani battle group once fired on itself for a full minute before anyone could stop it. She sent human scientists to create bioweapons. Not against living things, humanity refused to do that, but against the crystal computing systems that the Kelth used for everything. Tiny organisms designed to eat the special crystals their civilization was built on. Kelth computers across 3 sectors began to simply fall apart. She sent human diplomats to worlds the Concord had long ignored. Slave species, conquered species, species who had been protected, into quiet submission. She told them the truth about the Council. She showed them records of things the Council had hidden. She offered them freedom if they would simply stop helping the Concord war effort. And many of them did. World after world went quiet. Factories that had made weapons for the Council stopped making weapons. Ports that had supplied Council fleets refused to open their gates. The great Concord war machine began to slow, choked by 1,000 small wounds it could not see. But humanity paid for all of this. Oh, how they paid. The Concord was not weak. Their ships were still many, and their soldiers were still brave. They struck back. Human colony worlds were bombed, cities burned, millions died. The colony of New Damascus, home to 12 million people, was turned into a cloud of ash by a Morvani assault fleet. The water world of Kiri, where 2 million human children had been born, was made into a sea of boiling steam by ore ships. Ilyana attended every memorial, every single one. She stood before weeping families and read out the names of the dead. She did not speak comforting words. She did not promise anything. She just read the names, one by one, so the dead would not be forgotten. Her aide, Lieutenant Park, now Captain Park, his youthful face replaced by hard lines, watched her come back from these memorials looking smaller each time. After the memorial for Kiri, he found her alone in her quarters, staring at a wall. "Marshal," he said gently, "you should rest." Ilyana did not turn around. 2 million, Park, she said. 2 million people. I knew some of their mothers. I served with some of their fathers. We did not cause this, ma'am. No, she said. We did not cause this. The Concord caused this. But I chose to fight this war the way I am fighting it. I could have surrendered. I could have saved them. I chose not to. Those deaths are on my hands, Captain. Park was quiet for a long moment. Was it worth it? He asked finally. Ilyana turned around. Her eyes were wet, but her face was hard as stone. No, she said. It was not worth it. But the alternative was worse. That is what war is, Park. The least terrible option, chosen too late. I learned that when I was a young officer. I hoped I was wrong. I was not wrong. The war ground on. Year 1 ended. Year 2 began. Humanity lost 3 more colonies. The Concord lost 8,000 ships. Neither side could break the other. Then came the siege of Morelian Deep. Morelian Deep was a star system that the Morvani hegemony considered holy. 3 ringed planets, each one home to Morvani breeding grounds that had existed for millions of years. The Concord had never allowed outsiders there, not even other Concord species. Ilyana chose it as her target on purpose. If we hit their holy world, she explained to her commanders, we force them to defend it with everything they have. And if we break their fleet there, the Morvani are out of the war. Without the Morvani, the Concord cannot hold its lines. It was a terrible battle. 9 million humans died. 3 moons were reduced to asteroid fields. 600 human ships were lost. For a while, it looked like humanity would be broken there, in the dark space near those sacred rings. But humanity did not break. Wave after wave of Terran ships arrived. Reinforcements from hidden yards the Concord did not know still existed. New weapons, developed in secret during the war, were tested in live combat. The Morvani fleet, pressed from every direction, finally shattered. And watching this, the liquid consensus of Ore made a decision. They had never wanted this war. Their aquatic civilization could not afford it. They withdrew from the Concord alliance and declared neutrality. The Concord had lost 1/3 of its military power in a single day. On Tharun, Archon Veselian stood alone in his crystal chamber and looked at the star map on his wall. For the first time in 3,000 years, the Concord was losing, and he began, slowly, to understand what his species had woken up. 3 years had passed since the day the Council declared war. 3 years of burning cities and dying stars. 3 years of memorials and mourning. 3 years of human ships, pushing deeper and deeper into Concord space, taking system after system, not through conquest but through a patient, terrible grinding of the enemy's strength. And now, on a cold morning in the calendar of Earth, something impossible happened. A Terran battle group jumped into the Tharun system. Tharun, the holy heart of the Concord, the world where Archon Viselion had declared war 3 years ago. The great capital of an empire that had ruled the stars for 10,000 years. No enemy fleet had ever reached Tharun, not once. The defenses around the world were the strongest in the galaxy, 50,000 automated weapon platforms, a ring of defense stations the size of small moons, 3 whole fleets in permanent orbit. But the human fleet did not try to fight through the defenses. They came out of warp, announced their presence, and stopped. They did not fire a single shot. They simply sat there, in clear view, with their weapons silent. On the bridge of the Tus Ozymandias, War Marshal Ileana Voss looked out at the blue and silver world below. She was older now. Her hair had gray in it. The scar on her cheek had company, now a burn along her jaw from a battle 2 years ago. Her uniform still had no decorations. "Open a channel to the spire of Tharun," she said quietly. "Direct to Archon Viselion. Personal." The communications officer hesitated. "Marshal." "He may not answer." "He will answer." A few minutes passed. Then the screen on the bridge came to life. Archon Viselion appeared, his crystal body flickering with colors that Ileana had never seen before. He looked smaller than she remembered from 3 years of recordings. Older, tired. "War Marshal Voss," he said. His voice was steady but strained. "You have come to end us." Ileana shook her head slowly. "No, Archon. I have come to talk. Just you and me. Your ship. Any neutral location you choose. No weapons. No fleets watching. I give you my word you will be safe." Viselion was silent for a long time. "Why?" he finally asked. "Because," Ileana said, "we have killed enough of each other. I am tired, Archon. You are tired. Let us sit down like thinking beings, and see if we can stop this." The meeting took place on a small, lifeless moon, in a system that belonged to no one. Both of them came with a single shuttle. Both of them came without guards. They met in an empty dome of glass that looked out over a cold gray landscape and a black sky full of stars. Viselion's crystal form moved slowly. The war had been hard on him too. His species lived long, but they felt lost deeply. Ileana had seen reports that he had not slept a full cycle in over a year. They sat across from each other at a simple metal table. "I have a question," Viselion said. "Before anything else, I need to understand." "Ask," Ileana said. "Why? Why this way? Why the hidden ships and the banned machines and the attacks on our sacred worlds? We offered you peace many times. We offered you mercy. You could have surrendered after the first year. We would have been gentle. Your species would have lived. Why fight this way? Why choose such terrible paths when softer ones were open?" Ileana looked at him for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was quiet, but every word was clear. "Because we know what gentle means, Archon. We have done it to our own kind. In our history, powerful human nations took over weaker ones. They called it help. They called it protection. They called it civilization. They took the children of the weaker nations and taught them to forget their own languages. They took the land and called it a gift. They took the future and called it progress. We know exactly what your mercy would have looked like. We have seen the pattern too many times in our own story. We refuse to be the weaker nation in this story." Viselion was quiet. His crystal colors shifted slowly. "Then we were never enemies you could talk to," he said softly. "We were monsters you had to destroy." "No," Ileana said. "You were not monsters. You were just too old, Archon. Too used to being the strongest. Too sure that your way was the only way. You did not declare war on us 3 years ago. You had been at war with us for 60 years. We were just finally allowed to fight back." Viselion closed his crystal eyes. "What do you want, War Marshal?" Ileana took a deep breath. She had thought about this answer for 3 years. "I want the Concord dissolved," she said. "Not destroyed. Dissolved. The old council ends. In its place, we build something new. A loose alliance. No species holds veto power over another. No developmental species label. No protected worlds that are really controlled worlds. Every member equal. Every member free to grow at their own speed. Every member free to leave if they choose. And humanity's place in this new order? One voice among many. Not the leader, not the ruler, just a member, like the Or, like the Morvani, like you. Veselian opened his eyes in surprise. You have the strength now to rule. You have beaten us. You could take the throne. I know, Ilyana said. That is exactly why I will not. Thrones are what made this war. I am tired of thrones. The peace talks lasted 4 months. They were hard. Many council species did not trust humanity. Many humans did not trust the council. But slowly, agreement by agreement, a new order was built. The Galactic Concord Council was dissolved. In its place rose the Open Accord, a federation where the old rules no longer applied. Some worlds celebrated, some worlds mourned. Old empires always end with both. Many years passed. Ilyana Voss retired from military service. She refused all offers of political office. She bought a small house on a human colony world that orbited a yellow star near what had once been Kelth space. She grew a garden. She read old books. She gave speeches only rarely, and only to schoolchildren. One afternoon, as the colony sun was turning orange in the western sky, a young girl walked up to her garden fence. She was maybe 8 years old, the great-granddaughter of one of Ilyana's old soldiers. She had been learning about the war in school. Marshal Voss? The child asked shyly. Ilyana smiled and put down her watering can. I am not a marshal anymore, little one. Just Ilyana now. My teacher told us something today. She said when the council declared war on us, you smiled. Is that true? Ilyana was quiet for a moment. Then she nodded slowly. Yes, she said. It is true. Why? The child asked. Why would anyone smile about a war? Ilyana knelt down so their eyes were level. She looked at the child's small, serious face, at her bright eyes, at her whole long life still ahead of her, in a galaxy where humans were free. Because, little one, Ilyana said softly, some chains can only be broken when someone finally tries to tighten them. For 60 years, they were putting chains on us quietly. We could not fight quiet chains. But when they tried to pull them tight, we could see them at last. And we could break them. The child thought about this for a moment. Was it worth it? She asked. Ilyana looked up at the sky. The first stars were coming out. Human stars. Free stars. Ask me again when you are older, she said. She stood up and took the child's small hand. Come. The sun is setting. Let me walk you home. And together they walked down the quiet road, under a sky full of worlds, through the soft evening light of a galaxy that was, at last, truly free.